Mao believed that the situation in China demanded a peasant revolution, and he aggressively sought peasant recruits and soldiers. His focus on the peasantry wasn't simply practical. Ideologically, he believed that the peasant should be the center of the revolution, and the government built from that revolution. Quote, "Without the poor peasants, it would never have been possible to bring about in the countryside the present state of revolution, to overthrow the local bullies and the bad gentry, or to complete the democratic revolution. Being the most revolutionary, the poor peasants have won the leadership in the Peasant Association. This leadership of the poor peasants is absolutely necessary. Without the poor peasants, there can be no revolution. To reject them is to reject the revolution. To attack them is to attack the revolution. This general direction of the revolution has never been wrong." End quote. As with the New Culture movement, Mao believed that all vestiges of Chinese traditional culture needed to be overturned. This included Hisao, or filial piety, Confucianism, monarchism, ancestor worship, religion, and the authority of elders. He saw the Chinese as dominated by three separate institutions: the state, the clan, and the system of gods and spirits. Women, for their part, were dominated by all three of these institutions and were also dominated by men. These four authorities, political authority, clan authority, theocratic authority, and the authority of the husband, had to be dismantled in order for China to truly enter an egalitarian communist stage. Mao believed that the peasants were, by the very nature of their lives, the most free of the clan. This was one of the further arguments why the Chinese Revolution needed to be a peasant revolution.
A technique used by Mao to maintain power was propaganda. He used it to promote the positive aspects of his leadership. Mao also reformed the law to remain in power. For example, the anti-rightist movement was incorporated and persecuted all who criticized or even allegedly criticized Mao. In revolts, Mao used guerrilla warfare and his Red Army to maintain control and power as well. Mao firmly believed that controlling the countryside would also result in maintaining power, and he created labor camps during the collectivization period to increase his rule. Mao's foreign policy also played a part in his ability to maintain power because he often criticized and disagreed with other nations' actions, portraying them as negative influences.
Mao's goals, both economically and socially for China, was to use China's vast population to rapidly transform China from an agrarian economy into a modern communist society through the process of agriculturalization, industrialization, and collectivization. From 1949, Mao implemented economic policies after coming into power to prove that Chinese communism would be a success in bringing about economic growth, called the Great Leap. In agriculture, changes were made in three levels. First stage, land reform, was introduced in 1950. It aimed to take land from landowners and redistribute them among poor peasants, and increase produce to help industrial development in China. But as average holdings of land of peasants was less than 1 acre, mechanization and new farming methods were not utilized and China remained poor. Though peasant support increased, productivity level dropped. Mao is generally held in high regard in China, where he is often portrayed as a great revolutionary and strategist who eventually defeated Chiang Kai-shek in the Chinese Civil War and transformed the country into a major power through his policies. However, many of Mao's socio-political programs, such as the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, are blamed by critics from both within and outside China for causing severe damage to the culture, society, economy, and foreign relations of China, as well as enormous and unnecessary loss of lives, a peacetime death toll in tens of millions. Mao had little experience in foreign travels and only knew the Chinese language. He limited his focus purely to his own country and based his foreign policy on the assumption that foreign countries mattered only as far as they interfered with China or had ideas and experiences that China could learn from. The Sino-Japanese War was used to take over the country and rarely interfered with unless Chinese interests were involved. It was revealed during the Second Sino-Japanese War that Mao was merely concerned with the expansion of the CPC's influence and the weakening of the KMT. CPC officials arranged ceasefires with the Japanese in central areas to protect Japanese train lines and allow time for an increase in CPC membership, while at the same time pretending to strongly oppose the Japanese. Mao was so opposed to the KMT that he in fact desired Japanese occupation of China. Mao's strategies were opposed by the United States and Chiang Kai-shek. The U.S. saw Chiang as an important ally to help shorten the war by engaging the Japanese occupiers of China. Chiang, however, looked to build the ROC army for conflict with Mao at the conclusion of World War II. Mao would seek success after ousting the nationalists using the war against Japan. This led to the establishment of New China. Before this establishment, Mao set forth a new perception in order to make the new foreign policy of New China. Both the second plenary session of the 7th Central Committee of the Communist Party and the first session of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference made important decisions regarding New China's foreign policy. China renounced all diplomatic relations to the Kuomintang government established with foreign countries, treated heads of foreign diplomatic missions accredited to Old China as ordinary foreign nationals instead of diplomatic envoys, reviewed all the treaties and agreements Old China had concluded with foreign countries, gradually cleared up the prerogatives and influence the imperialist countries had in China, and established new diplomatic relations with other countries on the basis of mutual respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, equality, and mutual benefit. It would go more towards the side of socialism. The principal foreign policy was the protection of freedom, integrity of territory, and sovereignty of the country, upholding of lasting international peace and friendly cooperation between the peoples of all countries, in opposition to the imperialist policy of aggression and war. Mao would follow these views in his intervention in the Korean Civil War to stop the spread of imperialism and protect China's national security. Mao also would make an imperialist enemy with India after Chinese occupation of Tibet, as India wanted a stable Sino-Indian border. Mao's success began with his well-organized communist army helping to force the Japanese out of China and helped the communists gradually gain control of the country. On October 1st, 1949, Mao announced the establishment of the People's Republic of China. He experienced success in the Chinese Civil War against the Kuomintang. Mao launched the first 5-year plan in 1953 that aimed to end the Chinese dependence on agriculture to become a world power. New industrial plants were built and agricultural industries began to produce enough capital that China no longer needed any outside support. Mao's failures would begin in 1958 when he announced the Great Leap Forward, an attempt to increase agricultural and industrial production. This reform program included the establishment of large agricultural communes that contained as many as 75,000 people. The communes ran their own collective farms and factories. Each family received a share of the profits and also had a small private plot of land. However, 3 years of floods and bad harvests severely damaged levels of production. The scheme was also hurt by the decision of the Soviet Union to withdraw its large number of technical experts working in the country. In 1962, Mao's reform program came to an end and the country resorted to a more traditional form of economic production. After the failure of the Great Leap Forward, fearing the prospect of losing his place at the political stage, as he had lost esteem among top party leaders, Mao launched Cultural Revolution in 1966. The idea was to continue the armed struggle through young people and teenagers and give power directly to the Red Group. Mao closed the schools in China and people were forced to manufacture weapons for the Red Army. This led to the destruction of Chinese heritage and prosecution of millions.